Hi everybody. So, the Constitution of the United States is in trouble. It's not in trouble because of President Obama, because it's in trouble because of the Constitution of the United States itself. And it's trouble with the rest of the world. So, what was a beacon of freedom, a beacon of liberty, whatever you want to call it, practically right now is no more the model that the countries are using to create their own constitution. It's a very interesting article that came out today from the New York Times about this. I wanna talk about that. This is called "We the People Loses Appeal with People Around the World." The Constitution, we could say, has got better days practically. Is the sacred text of the American people, and it is also the oldest written constitution still in force anywhere in the world. But the problem is that its influence is waning. What happened is that in 1987, on the Constitution's bicentennial, Time magazine calculated that of the 170 countries that exist today, more than 160 actually have written charters modeled directly or indirectly on the US version, or practically on the US Constitution. But what's happening is that a quarter century later, and it's very interesting that it's happened after, with the arrival of Reagan, with the change of the attitude of Americans towards corporations, towards people in general, and try to get back to the original Constitution practically many centuries ago, this model is vanishing, is no more interesting for other countries in the world. And we are not talking about the so-called third world country. We are talking about the most industrialized countries in the world. The study that was published in June in the New York University Law Review bristled with data. Its authors coded and analyzed the provision of 729 constitutions adopted by 188 countries from 1946 to 2006, and they considered 237 variables regarding various rights and ways to enforce the constitutions. Among the world's democracy, Professor Law and Versti conclude constitutional similarity to the United States was clearly gone into free fall. Over the 1960s and 1970s, democratic constitutions as a whole became more similar to the US Constitution, only to reverse course in the 1980s and the 90s. The turn of the 21st century, however, saw the beginning of a steep plunge that continues through the most recent year for which we have data, to the point that the constitutional world democracies are on average less similar to the US Constitution now than they were at the end of the World War II. Of course, if you look from the right-wing perspective, it means that we are the beacon of freedom. But unfortunately, if you look at the results of what freedom is really and developed, especially in Australia, New Zealand, and most under Canada, most industrialized countries, and Scandinavia and Germany, right now, that beacon of freedom is moved from the United States to somewhere else. There are lots of possible reasons for this. For instance, the American Constitution is terse and old, and it guarantees relatively few rights. That's the point. In the American Constitution, you don't have so many rights. The commitment of some members of the Supreme Court to interpreting the Constitution according to its original meaning in the 18th century may send the signal that it is of little current use to say a new African nation. And the Constitution waning influence may be part of a general decline in American power and prestige, which it's what happened specifically between the year 2000 and 2008 under George W. Bush. In an interview, Professor Lowe identified the central reason for the trend: the availability of newer, sexier, and more powerful operating systems in the constitutional marketplace. It's like nobody wants to have a Windows 3.1 anymore. They want to have something that is much more dynamic, that defends much more the rights of the people, that is more flexible, that adapts to the times and to the centuries and to the evolution of the people. In a television interview during a visit to Egypt last week, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we're talking about the Supreme Court, she seemed to agree, actually. She said, "I would not look to the United States Constitution if I were drafting a constitution in the year 2012. And this is Supreme Court justice. I mean, the Supreme Court judge, that she said, I don't want to use this in 2012. If I had to rewrite a new constitution, I recommend the South African Constitution, I recommend the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, of the European Convention of Human Rights. The rights guaranteed by the US Constitution are parsimonious by international standards, for instance, and they are frozen in an amber. As Stanford Levinson wrote in 2006, in our undemocratic Constitution, the US Constitution is most difficult to amend of any constitution currently existing in the world today. Yugoslavia used to hold that title, but Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore. So the United States Constitution, in terms of being frozen in time, is at the level of what was Yugoslavia during the Soviet Union. Other nations routinely trade in their constitutional wholesale, replacing them on average every 19 years. By odd coincidence, Thomas Jefferson, in a 1789 letter to James Madison, said that every constitution naturally expires at the end of the 19 years because the earth belongs always to the living generation. These are the founding fucking fathers that say this. This is not a joke. These are the founding fathers that are alerting people about what's the meaning of the Constitution is, which is exactly the opposite of what actually the Tea Party is doing. These days, the overlap between the rights guaranteed by the Constitution and those most popular around the world is spotty. We recognize rights not widely protected, including ones to a speedy and public trial, and we are an outlier in prohibiting government establishment of religion, but the Constitution is out of step with the rest of the world in failing to protect, at least in so many words, a right to travel, the presumption of innocence, and entitlement to food, education, and health care. We have our idiosyncrasies. Only 2% of the world's constituents protects, as our Second Amendment does, a right to bear arms. Our brothers in arms are Guatemala and Mexico. I mean, this is the kind of companions the United States has. The Constitution waning global structure is consistent with the diminished influence of the Supreme Court, which is losing the central role it once had among courts in modern democracy. Aaron Barak, then the president of the Supreme Court of Israel, wrote in the Harvard Law Review in 2010, even Israel is criticizing the structure of the American Constitution right now. The problem is this one. America is in danger. It's becoming something of a legal backwater. And this is the Australian High Court judge that is saying this. He said that look at India, South Africa, and New Zealand, that constitution is becoming more appealing. And the other thing is that if we enter in a new constitutional superpower right now, it's not the United States, but it's the most hated country from the United States. Not France, but they are causing the Canadians. Canadians' law, he wrote, serves as a source of inspiration for many countries around the world. The new study suggests a Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom, adopted in 1982, may now be more influential than its American counterpart. The Canadian Charter is both more expansive and less absolute. It guarantees equal rights for women and disabled people, allows affirmation action, and requires that those arrested be informed of their rights. On the other hand, it balances those rights against such reasonable limits and as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Of course, on the other side, you have Justice Scalia that say every banana republic in the world has a Bill of Rights, he said. Yeah, but the point of this one is this one. And I want to just go back to the point. Scalia, he doesn't get it. He represents the right wing of this country in the worst way, because when he really believes that any banana republic can adopt the constitution as different from the United States, because he believes that every country that is not the United States is a banana republic, for the simple reason that he doesn't know what the constitution of the other country is, as many of the Republicans, because they don't care about the other country, so they don't even care to know what the constitution in the other country is. And at the same time, they are the one that they least know what its own constitution is. Their own constitution is. If you look at the number of people and the percentage of people that really know and analyze the constitution, they are much more Democrat and liberal, that detailed analyze and a cultural level than the Republicans. They took for granted what other people told them what the Constitution is, and not without reading the American Constitution and comparing the American Constitution to the other constitution in the world. And why right now we the people is losing terrain against more modern, more sophisticated, more democratic, more free-oriented constitutions, while the United States Constitution, especially after the last corporation are people laws, lost completely credibility, because at this point compared institution, oligarchy, to single people, giving them the same rights, but denying the same rights to women, gays, minorities, especially women, that they don't have equal pay like men in the United States, which is for me absolutely weird. So you cannot say that we the people is anymore this example for the world, is completely lost in time. It's about time America understand that their constitution need to be flexible, as their founding father, and the founding father said, as I mentioned before, every 19 years you should change and adapt the constitution to adapt it to what your time are in that moment. But Americans refuse this concept, but they believe it is the best constitution in the world.